Good morning. Thank you for joining us today and coming out to our weekend Bible forum on finding comfort in a troubled world. I hope that you've enjoyed the series so far. I tell you, it's just been a wonderful experience to put these lessons together and to hear Brother Aaron speak to us over the course of the weekend. He did a fabulous job last night, and I'm excited today to share with you some more things that I think really, these come from the heart, and I know that this topic especially is one that can be very emotional because it just doesn't really get much more personal than it does with your kids. So thank you for coming out today. I want to put this sign up on the screen for you and talk about this. I just love it. Avenge yourselves. Live long enough to be a problem to your kids. That sign says it all, doesn't it? It really does. You know, we love our kids, but they do put a lot of gray hair on us. And we do struggle sometimes with parenting, but there's really nothing like it. You know, it seems to me, at least in my own experience, I wanted to rush every stage. I was excited to see them born, and then it seemed like I just couldn't wait for them to get out of diapers and then to start walking. And then it was exciting to see them go off to school for the first time, but I can't wait to see what's going to be like in junior high. And junior high gets there, I can't wait to see what's like in high school. And then, there's going to be time to start driving, and I don't have to be a taxi anymore and run them all over town. They'll be able to get their driver's license. And although I will say for our first kid, getting the driver's license was pretty stressful. It was one of those kind of things that it really played with my mind. But I can tell you by the time our son got his driver's license, I was excited. I was totally excited and ready for him to go. And I will tell you, we're wrapping up here in just about a month our experience of raising kids through high school. Both our kids will graduate high school from here in Bellbrook. And I told Becky last week as I was walking out of the school and just saying to her over the phone that, I have never been more ready to close a chapter of my life than raising a kid and having to go through high school. And I will think about it, here in a few weeks, we're going to be 44 years old, 43 for my wife, and we're going to have an empty nest. It's amazing. Just absolutely amazing how fast it's gone. Our kids are going to be gone. And sometimes when our kids leave, they go. And they go away from much of what we raised them with, including their faith. They go out headstrong and rebellious and make all sorts of decisions that are going to impact the rest of their life. And we really struggle with this, with the loss of control and not knowing what to do. And we wonder sometimes, where did we go wrong? And how did this happen? And I'll go back and replay events in my life and try to understand, maybe it was at this point when I said this or did this, and that is what got them off track. And then we wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and we're trying to figure out, what do we do? What can I do that will get them back? How do we handle it? How do we cope with wayward children? I will tell you, I think it is one of the most difficult things a parent can face. I really can't think of a more painful thing than for a parent who has a child that rebels against God, because the pain goes deep. And it is a grief that just won't go away. And so the question is how do you cope with it? I will tell you what a lot of parents do when they go through this situation. Some parents make the decision that they're just going to withdraw. And usually this is done to protect yourself. And what I mean by withdrawing is mentally and emotionally we disconnect with our wayward child. We say, there's not much I'm going to be able to do about it, so I'm just done. I don't want to have to deal with it. I don't want to have to worry about it. I'm tired. I just can't handle it anymore. Or if we don't withdraw, then sometimes we get angry and we just lash out and we return hurt for hurt. I've done that to my regret. We get angry, we can get loud, we can yell and scream, and it doesn't do much good. Or we can just fight for control. And I will tell you, this is something that will always escalate the situation. And really, what happens is we fight for control. And the more we fight for it, we create a greater distance, emotionally and spiritually. And so really, as we begin to think about this, how do I cope with wayward children? The question really should be that I think of first is this: how would God want me to respond in this very difficult situation? And the question that we're trying to answer today in this is really this. It's very simple, and that is, as a Christian parent, how should I relate to my wayward child? Well, we're going to look today at Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. And I know that you are all familiar with this passage. But maybe you've never read this passage from the standpoint of a parent of a wayward child. Because usually what we do here is we look at this parable and how it represents God and how the people here, the sons especially, represent sinners. But I want to suggest to you that it is no accident here that the Father is pictured, God is pictured as the Father here, and us as His children. There's no accident in that. And so what we see is that in all of this, in the story of the prodigal son, is that there lies an inherent principle. And that principle is this: as God relates to me as His child, so must I relate to my children. And I want you to keep that in mind as we go through here and study through this morning. But before we do, what I want to do is read from Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15, and I want us to start in verse 11. We're just going to reread the story of the prodigal son. And as we read this together this morning, what I want you to do is to be able to read this from the perspective of a parent of a wayward child. Let's begin reading. He said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property with reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, and I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again, and he was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but answered his father and said, 'Look, many these years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost, and he was found. You know, in this story, we are not provided with a very important aspect of parenting. And that is, what we don't see here is the discipline side of parenting. But what we do see here in this story is how hurting parents must demonstrate the love of God and exhibit forgiveness to their children. There's not a lot here about parental discipline. And I think there are plenty of other passages that deal with this, just we don't have time to do it today. We shouldn't ignore those passages on discipline. But I will tell you, in my own experience of raising children, now I feel that looking back, I was very heavy on discipline. And I fell short on showing grace and love and compassion, especially in the younger years. And one of the ways that I would deal with it, I will tell you, one of the ways that I would discipline and why I get real short of the kids is it was not so much about what they had done wrong per se, is how it affected me. And that's what made me so angry. And I would go after them. I would yell and scream and tell them to get up to their room. I tell you, I wish I could have some of those moments back. Because I messed up. Listen, the older I get as a parent, I will tell you, I think that the Scripture teaches us that love has got to be the foundation surrounding our discipline. And I want to come back to that toward the end of the lesson today. I hope I'll get time to do it. But what I want you to see here in this lesson today is how the father in this story hurt over the very poor decisions that his son made and how he chose to handle it. And I found these thoughts by another person. I want to share some of these with you this morning, so I hope that you'll enjoy it. Let's first talk about the hurt of the father. What are your desires for your kids? You know, I tell you, as a dad, I have a soon-to-be 22-year-old and an 18-year-old at home. So I'm almost at the end of this. But my desire today is the same it was when they were born, and that is I want to see my kids grow up to embrace my spiritual values. I not only want them to play an active and productive and positive role in society, but my greatest desire is that they grow up to be a force inside the kingdom of our Lord. I'll tell you, with our girl, there has been nothing more satisfying to me than to send her off to college and watch her over the last 4 years grow up into her own faith and see her making good and positive decisions on her own in response to her spiritual relationship with God. Just about 4 weeks ago, she made a very important decision that in reality is going to affect her the rest of her life in a good way. And Dad is proud. But I will tell you, there is also nothing more distressing than seeing one of your other children grow up and walk away from their faith in God and elect to make themselves their own God and call their own shots and live for themselves. And when that happens, the pain runs deep. And I think there's 3 things that we wind up feeling. When our children walk away from God, one of the first things that we're going to feel is rejection. And as we think about how we get rejected, one of the ways that we get rejected, I feel, is that we feel rejected as a person. And I don't want you to run past verse 12 too fast, because as you read this, it may go missed in a 21st century setting, but these are some powerful words this young man is communicating with his father. And I want you to understand the amount of pain that this would have caused the father. In essence, what this young man is saying to his dad is, I want my inheritance right now. I don't care about you. I don't care what goes in your life. I just want your money. One of the things I read last week in preparation for this lesson is that scholars will tell you that in the ancient Near East, that such a request like this was in essence wishing for the death of the father. They don't go any further than that. That's what he's communicating. I wish you were dead. So when our kids walk away, sometimes we feel that we've been rejected as a person. We also feel like our rejection can happen with our family heritage. I will tell you, I'm in the third generation of Christians in my family. And I want to see the fourth, and I want to see a fifth generation. That's been my goal. And the Lord willing, that will happen. And it hurts a lot when we have a child that makes a decision to walk away from that faith heritage and the family heritage. Every preacher that has a son has a dream that one day, when their little boy grows up, that he is going to make a decision that he is going to follow in the footsteps of his daddy and preach. And it hurts when they come in and say, I don't want any part of that life. And we go back to this text. And we see that this man is in essence telling his dad, I don't want to be associated with this family. I want to walk away from everything this family means. Sometimes we may feel that our values have been rejected. You know, this young man, when he goes off to the foreign country, it's not like he's going off to try to find a synagogue somewhere to place membership with. He has walked away from God. And at the end of verse 13, notice here, he has gone out and he has squandered his property with reckless living. Prodigal living is the way some of the older versions use that word there. Reckless living. So we feel rejected. We also feel humiliated. You know, this, especially understanding the Jewish culture, everybody knew everybody. Everybody was involved in everybody's business. And you can imagine that in this situation, this is the last thing. Having a child go off on his own is the last thing that his father wants to have to endure. It's going to be shameful. Even those who were more understanding and would come and talk about, we know how you feel, we understand, even that is humiliating. And then we might feel guilt. If a child goes astray, a parent will feel guilt. And some of this is true because I think when we look back, we replay events over, we see mistakes we made, we wish we could have some do-overs. I think there's some true guilt there. And every one of us carries that to an extent. But I will tell you that when we face guilt, the vast majority of the guilt that we face is most likely false guilt based on the nagging feeling that we have somehow felt as a parent. And maybe you've told yourself that I have failed as a parent. And maybe as a parent who is dealing with a child who has gone off on their own way, we have felt the stinging judgment of other Christians inside the church. I will tell you, the church has a job, and it is not to judge others, it is to help others and encourage others. Think about it in this regard. Who is pictured as the father here in this story? We all know the answer. It's God. And if you think about it, God has wayward kids. God is the best parent there could ever be. And as you look at this story here, he had a couple of sons in this story that have gone off on their own way. And yes, the older son was wrong. We don't know how he responded. But is anybody willing to say that God is a failure? Now, yes, I understand that parental training and influence are a major factor in all of this, but we also need to understand that our kids are being bombarded in ways and with the type of pressure that has been unseen in previous times in the American culture. They are being bombarded with the world. They are being bombarded by the flesh. They are being bombarded by Satan each and every day. And it is starting younger and younger and younger. And I want you to understand that even the child from the model Christian home is at best an immature believer who could easily fall into terrible sin or reject God. Let me repeat that, because I want you to hear it, because a lot of times we look at families, we look at the other families and say, man, they are perfect. They got a great marriage, they got a great home, they got a great life, they got great kids. We kind of get in this comparison mode. Satan comes in and he just uses that as a club to beat us up. Even the child from the model Christian home is at best an immature believer who can easily fall into terrible sin or reject God. And so what I want us to understand is that godly parents who do their best to raise kids in the faith will, at some point, maybe have a child that rejects God. But what do we do with this passage? When I lived out in a different state, I had a brother who read this passage, and he was very snide and very arrogant and haughty. And he would read this passage and kind of look down his nose at other people inside the church family who had kids that were struggling. And his conclusion was, well, if they have kids that have gone off on their own, then they must be at fault as parents. They didn't raise their kids right. And so how is he looking at this passage, Proverbs 22:6? Well, we can look at it in two ways. And this brother was looking at it as an ironclad promise. And again, that idea is that if the child has been trained properly, then they're going to turn out okay, and it's a guaranteed promise. If they don't, then it must be the parent's fault. So is that how we should view this verse? I will tell you that's not the right view on this verse. Really, this is a general maxim of life, and that is, it is a general thing. It is not a guaranteed promise. And I want you to take away from this today that it is not always a sign of parental failure if a child goes his own way. I have known many parents who did everything they know what to do. Everything they need. They read Bible class lessons to their kids. They prayed. They were together. The father was an influence. They were in church. They had preachers in their homes. They did it all. And still have a child walk away. So what happens when my child walks away? How should I cope with this? What can I learn from this story in Luke chapter 15 that will help me in how I look at my child who has wandered off? Well, the first thing I need to remember is to always be loving. And what we're going to do here is look at 7 ways in the text and how the father of the prodigal always demonstrated unending love when his son was wandering. And I want to put verse 12 back on the screen because here's one of the first principles that we need to understand, and that is the idea of relinquishment without rejection. Read this again. I want you to look here. Here the young son has come up to his father and he has said, "Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me." Now, what you don't read here is the father saying, well, okay, I'm going to give the inheritance, but I don't ever want to see you again. You take it, you get out of here, this relationship is over. You don't see that here. What you do see is him granting his young son the ability to make decisions, and even poor decisions, without rejecting him as his son. You know, I can think back when our kids were younger, we had control. And we get used to that control. And when they grow up and as we let go, letting go of that control can become a very difficult thing. But I'll tell you, as your child enters into adulthood, if you are not relinquishing control to your child, you don't love your child as you should. You cannot, when they reach a certain age, you cannot control every aspect of their life. And so if the sooner I can come to that realization, it's important, because if I'm trying to hold down and exercise control, guess what's going to happen? They're going to rebel and go 100 miles the other direction. So what I need to be doing as I'm raising my kids is to get them to understand that they are always going to have to answer to God for every decision they make. And if I love my child, I'm going to relinquish control as they mature without rejecting them for the poor choices that they may make. I also see here in this story the father's deep concern. Notice verse 20. He is always looking over the horizon for the return of his son. Always. I don't see him protecting himself here by hardening his heart against his son. And it is so easy in these situations to do just that. It hurts, and the easy way to mask the hurt is just to shut down and withdraw and no longer be concerned. So I've got to guard against being self-focused. And really, that's easy to do, again, because we think, well, all that he's done to me, all the money I've spent on him or her, they don't care. Well, I guess what? I don't care either. This father is saying, I couldn't have cared more. Deep concern. Also in this story, we see heartfelt compassion. This boy, he's coming back. He's been slopping hogs, living with the pigs. There would have been a dirty, smelly thing going on here. Pigs are off limits anyway for Jews. He would have been unclean. Dressed in rags, looking awful. And as he comes back up, we don't see the father saying, well, you just got what you deserve. Now get up there, get cleaned up, and then come downstairs and present yourself to me. You don't see that anywhere. You see heartfelt compassion. And you also see outward affection. The father runs to him, he embraces him, and he kissed him. And he does this even before he knows whether the son is repentant or not. It's just enough that he has come back. And the father's overjoyed. And his love just pours out of the father here. And he's demonstrating physical affection. He loves his son. Outward affection and unaffected humility. Don't run past this either. In verse 20, he ran and embraced him and kissed him. It was totally, culturally a no-no for a nobleman to run. He runs. He gets there. It's undignified. But you know what? This father doesn't care anything about public opinion. He values his son more than what others cared about. Unaffected humility. Now look at verse 22. Undeserved generosity. The father said to his servants, bring quickly out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Did his son deserve any of that? This is total grace. It really is. And think about how the father, even the older son, who's lashing out at him as you go down toward the end of the chapter. In fact, he disassociates himself with his brother and his father. This son of yours, when he came back, you did all of this. And notice how the father answers, see, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Did that son deserve that? The question I'm asking here is, am I as gracious with my children as God is as gracious with me? That's the question. And finally, undeserved acceptance. Undeserved acceptance. The boy was not put on probation. Instead, he was restored with the full rights of sonship. And he was able to come back in. He was not something that was given over time. He was just brought in. In fact, earning forgiveness over time is never forgiveness. So that is something to keep in mind here as you think about what had happened here. And I will tell you, as you look at that, this is how God loves us. And it is how our love should be toward our children. Okay, now I want to talk secondly about the readiness to forgive, because there is something else you see here in this. Our kids may have wandered a long way away. And we constantly need to be prepared to forgive. You know, that boy could never experience the Father's forgiveness until he repented. But I want you to see here that the blockage in the relationship is not on the Father's part, it is all on the Son. Because the Father was ready and eager and excited to forgive at the very first sign of repentance. He's not bitter. He's not going to make the boy pay for what he had done. And I want you to see these 7 aspects of forgiveness here. And one of the things as you look, this is in verse 22 through 24. We're going to leave this up on the screen for the next few minutes. The forgiveness is immediate. Forgiveness must be an immediate, decisive action. And I said this a moment ago, and it's still true. Earning forgiveness over time is not forgiveness. Another thing we learn here is that it was total. Once and for all. It's over, it's done, it's complete. Let's move on. Total forgiveness. And it was also something that was forgotten. It was put away. It was not saved to be reharvested later as some kind of ammunition in the next big fight they got in. It was forgotten. Now, I understand that we can't totally forget the hurt that comes into our mind. But really, it comes down to a decision that we must make, not to bring it up again, not to dredge it up. Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross, and she was once reminded by a reporter of an especially cruel thing that someone had done to her. And when questioned about it, she didn't seem to remember it. And she was questioned further about it, and she says, I don't remember it, but I do distinctly remember forgetting it. Great answer. Forgiveness means we've got to forget what happened. We need to understand it's costly. Forgiveness means that you must bear the cost while the offender goes free. Well, that's tough. I don't see any martyr complex with this father. I mean, he doesn't go around saying, well, look at what you put me through. He doesn't demand any pity. Look at how much I have been hurt. He simply absorbs the son's wrongs. And his forgiveness was restorative. He restored the son to the full privileges of sonship. The son does not come back to servanthood status. He has been fully restored as the son in the family, with all the rights, all the privileges. And there was not any guilt blame going on. I think sometimes in these situations we want to build up a scorecard of guilt and blame. And sometimes we'll excuse our own guilt by blaming our wayward kid. You don't see any of that going on here. What you see is true forgiveness. And finally, this father's forgiveness was active and it was not passive. Passive forgiveness just lets go, but things stop there. There's no continuation of the relationship. Active forgiveness is something that brings kindness to the relationship. And active forgiveness is what brings out the best robe. It's what brings out the ring. It's what brings the sandals, and it's what kills the fatted calf. That's active forgiveness. It is not only anxious to forget the past, but also to restore the relationship. And so the question is, as we close today, it's very simple. How should I cope with my wayward children? That's the question. And here's the answer. I should cope with my wayward child the same way that God copes with me. God is always ready to lavish forgiveness and love on His sons and daughters. He wants to forgive quickly and totally. And I know that the prodigal son received it. And I'm not sure whether the older son ever did. We're not told. But you know, as you think about this word extravagant here, or this word prodigal here, that word means extravagant or excess. And so in this story we see prodigal love for the prodigal son. And as a parent, I hope that we can all say that we have that prodigal type love for our kids, no matter what they've done or what path they've chosen to go in this world. Thank you for listening today. I hope that this has been something that will encourage you. We'll take a few moments and have you ask any questions or make any comments that you'd like to with this lesson. Thank you.